Okay, so this is section 3.2 notes. We're going to be journalizing some transactions. If you have your transaction sheet from last chapter, we'll be journalizing paying cash for insurance, buying supplies on account, and paying cash on account. So we'll be debiting supplies, crediting accounts payable, and then debiting accounts payable and crediting cash on these two. So we'll move. This is the learning objectives dealing with the prepaid insurance and supplies transactions. So the first transaction, we're dealing with the multi-column journal. The special amount columns are here. The account title we write for whatever's in the journal. And so this transaction says pay cash for insurance, $900, check number 2. We have the 4 steps: date, what's debited, credited, and what's in the account title. The T account here shows what is being debited and credited. This is what should be on your transaction sheet from last time. We're increasing insurance in this transaction. We're decreasing cash when we pay cash. When there's a check being written, we're paying cash. So step 1 is the date. The general column has the account title, prepaid insurance debit. We're increasing the asset, so we need to debit the asset. We're writing a check, so we're crediting cash, decreasing the asset, so we have a debit and credit that equals the accounting equation. Last step is the source document. This here tells you a little bit about what goes up, what goes down. It's basically telling you in a sentence or two the T account. Remember, all accounts written in the general debit or credit columns must have an account title written. All amounts in either general debit or credit column must have the account title written. That's what they mean there. So that's how we will journalize transaction for paying cash for an insurance. The next transaction they teach us, bought supplies on account from Canyon Office Supplies, 220, Memorandum 1. Remember, memorandum is the source document for when we don't have a check or receipt or a sales slip right at the moment. So when we do this transaction, again, it's on your chapter 2 transaction sheet. We increase supplies, so we debit the asset supplies. We increase the liability accounts payable with a credit. And when we do this, we will use 2 lines. Why are we using 2 lines? Because we are not using a special amount column sales. We didn't make a sale. And we're not using either debit or credit column because we didn't increase cash, we didn't receive cash, and we didn't decrease cash, we didn't write a check or pay cash. So since we didn't use the special amount columns, if you remember what we just said down here, all amounts written in the general debit or credit columns must have an account title written in here. So if we're not using this and both amounts are going to be in the general, either debit or credit, we need to have an account title for each debit and credit. That's why we have 2 lines for this transaction. So when it says bought supplies on account, we will use 2 lines. Increase supplies, we write the debit first, just like we did in our T accounts last chapter. And that is increasing the asset supplies. We increase the liability accounts payable to the company by crediting. Okay. Talks about how memorandum is a source document. This tells you about the T account in sentence form. And again, this has our 4 steps written on how to do this transaction. If you have any questions, you go through this step by step, but that's kind of what we talked about. Why do we have 2 lines again? Because you're going to be using the debit and credit in the general account. Pay cash on account is the next transaction. Pay cash on account to Canyon. We just charged $220 to them. Now we're going to pay a little bit of that bill off. We pay cash on account to Canyon Supplies. We wrote a check, so we know we're using the special amount column of cash because we wrote a check. We paid cash, so we're losing cash. We're crediting cash because we're lowering the asset cash. What goes in the account title? Well, we got to put the date 9. We put the account title that's in the general debit, accounts payable. How do we lower a liability? We debit it. we increased the liability by $220, meaning we owe them $220. Now we're paying them cash, so we need to debit the liability to lower the liability. So on the 9th, we put accounts payable because it's the one in the general. We debit and lower the liability, and we credit and lower the asset cash. That's what they're talking about here. The source document is the last step, and it's the check number 3. Again, this is to kind of explain what we just talked about. That's it.